If the novel was the art form of the 19th century and the motion picture was the art form of the 20th century, what's the art form of the 21st century? Content. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and you'll have all this content flowing right to your inbox. Hello and welcome to Ellroy Reads. This is the show where every week I look at a book that was influential to James Ellroy, and today I'm kind of switching the process a little bit because I'm talking about an author who's greatly inspired by James Ellroy, and that is Ian Rankin and his amazing novel Black and Blue. So Ian Rankin, I think, is just one of the greatest writers of all time, and I met him when I was writing James Ellroy's biography, Love Me, Fierce and Danger, and I interviewed him at the height of lockdown, and I was a little bit nervous, and he flashed up on my Zoom screen, and he had his chin in the palm of his hand like that, and I said, Mr. Rankin, I'm very, very happy to be talking to you, and he's like, I'll soon change that. But that was great because that told me, okay, don't be anxious, don't be effusive, just talk to him like anybody else in the world. And he was great, he was wonderful. He told me some wonderful stories about Ellroy and about his own writing career and how they intersected. So Ian Rankin, by the time he first saw Ellroy by the time Ellroy first inspired him, he had written 6 or 7 novels. He'd started the John Rebus series, which is most renowned, and the Rebus novels had been getting very strong reviews, but the sales were modest. And he was quite candid with me. He said, I was a mid-list writer, and what that means is I was not making waves. I was not making the bestseller lists. And unfortunately, editors and publishers, if you haven't produced a bestseller by your 4th, 5th, 6th novel, you're in danger of being dropped by your agent. You're in danger of being dropped out of the industry altogether. And this almost happened to Ellroy himself when Ellroy was dropped by Avon after his first 2 novels failed, and he was picked up by Otto Penzler and Mysterious Press. And it took him still a few more novels before he got to The Black Dahlia, his 7th novel, and he hit the bestseller list, and he hit the big time, and he never looked back. Now, where we are with Ian in the story is it was 1995, and Bouchercon was taking place in the UK for only the second time. It was taking place in Nottingham. And Ian Rankin went along. He's still a young writer. And there's a famous photograph, sorry about the light, from Bouchercon 1995. So we have Ian in the middle, drinking from Colin Dexter's pint. This is Mike Ripley, who's a very good writer, and I dedicated my Ellroy biography, Love Me, Fierce and Danger, to him. Here we have Otto Penzler, renowned editor. Here we have Talia Proctor, who is also a much-loved editor, and sadly she died young of cancer. And I don't know who the woman at the end is with the cigarette, but if any of you know, just write in, okay? So this was at Bouchercon in 1905. As you can see, everyone's drinking, having a good time. Ellroy was the guest of honor, and I've been informed that he was in that little group beforehand, but being militantly sober, and as Colin Dexter offered to buy a round for everybody, Ellroy made his excuses and left, and I've been told that Colin Dexter never forgave him for that. But to be fair, Ellroy is an alcoholic. It's not easy for him. I know it's not easy for him in Europe and Britain. There's so much alcohol. Alcohol is everywhere, and everybody's drinking all the time. But anyway, so Ellroy was the guest of honor. He gives this barnstorming speech, and Rankin could quote it to me. He's like, if you've got the stones, as a writer of fiction, you can take fact and you can change it to your own specifications. And Rankin had been reading a lot of James Ellroy, so he'd been reading the LA Quartet, and he was beginning to realize how much Ellroy had used real-life crimes of Los Angeles, like the Black Dahlia case, real-life gangsters, Mickey Cohen, and so forth, in his fiction. And he'd basically taken these real-life stories and he'd used them exactly how he wanted to, and also, and made it a plausible thing in his fiction, is that you really believe this because it was well researched. It was like you were opening up the secret history. It was giving you kind of answers you weren't getting from the standard history books. And of course, there was the mother's murder. Jean Ellroy was murdered. She was on a date in the Desert Inn with the Swarthy Man, as he was known. And Ian Rankin was really, really inspired by James Ellroy's speech there. Back then, they recorded the speech and you could buy it on audio cassette. And he told me that he played it back time after time after time until he really just memorized every lesson learned. And not everybody was impressed with Ellroy at the time. And members of the CWA, some writers didn't take to Ellroy's bravado. They felt it kind of grated, but Ian really, really, really liked it. So out of that, he says, I'm going to write a bestseller. I'm going to write a book as good as Ellroy, as better than Ellroy, and it's going to climb up the bestseller list. So he writes Black and Blue. The title is taken from Rolling Stones album, which is several of Ian's novels, Let It Bleed, were named after Rolling Stones albums. And the lessons he got from Ellroy here is that we have a real-life serial killer. The Bible John serial killings, 3 murders were attributed to Bible John in Glasgow in the late 1960s. And the MO was that women were picked up by this Bible John in the Barrowlands Ballroom, and they were taken away by him and murdered. He only picked up the moniker Bible John was the 3rd victim. He was overheard quoting passages from the Bible to her and making these condemnations of adultery. So it was assumed that he was a religious man. He was probably a misogynist, and religion and women hatred had become conflated in his mind. The murders stopped, and the case was never solved. There have been a number of suspects, but other murders have been attributed to him, but not definitively. We think that there was a murderer who died in prison on a whole life order. It may have been him, and then he was ruled out. Around the time, the mid-90s, DNA was being used to try and... DNA was a new tool at the police's disposal, but it wasn't able to form a definitive breakthrough. So Ian comes up with this ingenious idea. Rebus is investigating murders by a serial killer, a copycat serial killer who's given himself the name Johnny Bible. And because Bible John was the composite drawing they have of him, the witness description set of him, he's still a relatively young man in the late 1960s. He could easily have been alive in the mid-1990s. He could have just been, a middle-aged man. In fact, he might still be alive now. What if this serial killer, who's been in retirement, so to speak, reads about the Johnny Bible murders and decides he doesn't like anybody taking his crown? What if he decides to investigate the case himself? And he comes out of retirement. And what if he decides to begins investigating the police or investigating the case? What he will do whatever it takes to find this killer. So suddenly a lot of people are in danger. So I thought, that's a really original take on the serial killer genre. And it puts Rebus in a lot of danger. But there are other storylines at stake in this. There is the brutal death of an oil man. And Rankin took this basically from a story he heard. Someone had been drinking, a guy I knew had been drinking. He'd been talking to these 2 guys. They seemed friendly at first, and they got him out of the pub. They tied him to a chair. It looked like they were going to torture him. They're going to rob him. They were going to kill him. And then they get disturbed, and they run away. The guy got away scot-free, very shaken, but he got away. In the novel, Rankin fictionalizes this. It's a much more gory ending for the victim. But because this is an oil man victim, suddenly Rebus begins investigating were the killers in the oil industry. So he really begins investigating the North Sea oil boom. And in fact, there's lots of fascinating stuff here about the North Sea oil boom of the 70s and 80s and how it completely transformed the north of Scotland, not just all of the UK really, because it funded It funded Thatcher's tax cuts. It funded the boom and bust economy of the 1980s. And I've never been so gripped by any description of North Sea oil. You may have seen the film Local Hero by Bill Forsyth. It's a wonderful film, which is kind of about the same thing, but it's much more fanciful, much more of a light kind of fantasist comedy. But if you want to read about the North Sea oil boom in print, just read Black and Blue. It's fantastic. And there's numerous plot strands from the previous Rebus novels. They all come together. They come together very, very nicely. So there's a nice little epilogue to this in that a few years later, Ian Rankin got his bestseller. It was his breakthrough novel. The Rebus novels became absolutely huge, and he's continued to write them. He's now one of our greatest now, Sir Ian Rankin, and he's very grateful and appreciative towards James Ellroy. But a few years later, he was in a bookshop signing, and he asked James to write the inscription. Ian, you rule Tartan Noir, because Tartan Noir was this new thing. Many great crime writers were coming out of Scotland. Ian Rankin, Val McDermid, and there was just this boom in kind of like gory, gritty Scottish crime writing. There's the Bloody Scotland Crime Writing Festival. So Ian could go around saying, "Oh, look, James Ellroy gave me this wonderful label. This is the king of Tartan Noir." But as he's admitted to me, and as he's since admitted, he's just like, I asked James Ellroy to write that. But that's wonderful. That's wonderful PR. That's a very canny publishing strategy. And Ellroy's the king of that himself, being the demon dog of American crime fiction. He's got this persona, like he can switch on, he can dominate any bookshop. You automatically know when he's being interviewed that his persona takes over. So Black and Blue is an absolutely wonderful novel. It's one of the best of the Rebus novels, and I recommend it to you. And Ian gave me a wonderful blurb when my James Ellroy biography came out, Love Me, Fist and Danger. He gave me an absolutely wonderful blurb. I sent him an early copy, and he wrote, "Here is the skinny and one of the most charismatic and complex writers on the planet. It's every bit as gripping and twisted as a James Ellroy novel. Dig it, cats." So yeah, Ian really liked the book. I think he was a little bit shocked at how wild it was. I think he was quite taken aback. I mean, he knew Ellroy was wild, but like when he read how much I'd found out about Ellroy and how just how really revelatory it was, I think he was really taken back. But Ian's an absolutely fabulous guy. He's written a whole bunch of great novels. And if you want a place to start, why not try Black and Blue? And remember just who gave him that King of Tartan Noir label, with a little bit of a nudge from Ian Rankin himself. Okay, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time for another episode of Ellroy Reads. Thank you. Goodbye.